Here's what we know. On October 27th, 2016, the U.S. Federal Communications Commission passed 3-2 along party lines what was essentially an Internet user's Bill of Rights as far as ISPs were concerned. Now, the rules included several components that spelled out what users could expect from their ISP. It included things like opt-in permission to share website browsing history, geolocation, financial data with third parties, as well as stopping ISPs from sharing information about age, gender, and ethnicity. Additionally, ISPs had to take reasonable steps, that's a quote, reasonable steps to secure customer data. Now, that was brought about by several different instances of breaches for tens of millions of ISP users, and most of the time those breaches occurred with zero transparency of the breach until details were leaked into the press. Now, the most vocal critic of the rules in October was then Commissioner Ajit Pai, now the chairman of the FCC. He called the rules, quote, corporate favoritism, unquote. His argument then, and the one that is being used by Republican representatives now, is that the rules were unfair because they only applied to ISPs and not to other internet entities like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, and the like. In fact, what you'll hear directly, the quote that has been repeated by at least 4 or 5 different representatives, is that it doesn't make sense for your Verizon or your T-Mobile or your Sprint or your Comcast to be bound by the rules of protecting your data if Facebook and Google and other internet entities that we visit so many times a day aren't, which kind of makes sense, I guess. I want to talk a little bit about that fairness before we dive deeper into the story. Cheebert, Senator John Cornyn said that the rules were more burdensome than they help, specifically because they apply to some entities and not to others. Does that make sense to you? Is this actually a matter of fairness?
You want me to rant? I know you do. No, I don't like things being uneven, but I hate this ruling. I'm writing my senators and writing my representatives and saying, you guys what are you smoking? This is really bad for the consumers. When I told my wife this morning, she actually got really angry. And everybody should get angry. Why should we make it easy for these ISPs to sell our browser history? Because that's what they're going to do. They're going to sell it. And I don't like that one bit. And anyone that I find out that is going to vote for this, I'm going to make it my life duty to try and see about getting you out of office. Because this is probably the most bogus move of the Trump administration I've ever heard. End rant.
Okay. Well, we'll get back to but Lou, what about the fairness thing? It's true. What they're saying is true. These rules only apply to ISPs. They don't apply to Google. They don't apply to Facebook. They don't apply to Microsoft or Apple. And what they're saying is it's unfriendly to business because you're creating an unlevel playing field. Is that true? Does Microsoft, does Apple, does Google benefit from not having the same obligation to protect customer data, not having the same obligation to make sure that data is not being sold to third parties that the social media giants have?
I think part of their argument is the fact that they, with an ISP, they capture all of your traffic, right? No matter what it is. With these other places you go, Microsoft or Google or Facebook, they capture a scoped amount of information that you tend to control. That gets out there, especially Facebook and Twitter and that kind of thing. And so I don't necessarily agree with that fairness statement, right? Because you have more control on what's posted at these other places. But when you're using your ISP, you could, people go to all different types of places, sometimes by mistake, right? And these things are captured as if it's useful information and then sold off as if it's useful information. Now, hopefully one hopes that it's not PII, personal identifiable information, meaning coming back to you in some way, but who knows if they do any type of filtering. There's no regulation on this, right? So I think at the very least, there needs to be something that protects that data in some way, whether even if they say, hey, we might be collecting it and selling it, but it's not identifiable to you. Okay. But in the same sense, should they be collecting it at all? And I say no, right? So I think, I agree with Brian. It's time to, start using the your voice both on social networking and to your representatives, and start pushing them in the right direction to know, listen, the internet's supposed to be open and free and fair, and you're making it not. So I think it's insecure. I mean, these types of things, and we need to go in the right direction.
If I were to step back a little bit, if I were to try to see it from the point of view of Chairman Pai and of the now Republican FCC, I could understand the argument that they're making. I mean, you can look at this at face value and say, yeah, this is a anti-competitive bill. This is not letting the market settle it. This is not allowing us to choose with our money, with who we choose to do business with, which business practices should be followed. And I get that, because that is at the core of the conservative sensibility. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, okay, that's what they believe. However, here's my issue. There's really 2 points. The first point is, an ISP is not like a Google or a Microsoft or an Apple or Twitter, because I can't choose a different ISP. And that will be my second point, which is there's no competition among ISPs. It's not, if I don't like what Facebook is doing, in fact, I don't like what Facebook is doing, I don't use my Facebook account. I don't log in. I don't log and link any of my services to Facebook. That's a choice I can make, because there are several other services that I can use that are very Facebook-like. I only have Comcast. That's the only provider I can get unless I want to use a modem, a dial-up modem. So it's not real competition. And that's the second point, which is they're still operating under this illusion that we have a choice of our ISPs. If we don't like what one our ISP is doing, we can choose another one because they are doing what we're doing, what we like. We don't have that. In fact, that's been the primary issue. That was the whole driver of net neutrality, to spur innovation, to spur competition. The things that they say they're for, and yet they believe that it exists just because they think it exists, and it doesn't. So, all right, I'm doing the TWiT rant. This is bad. TWiT, let me throw this over to you. This is probably going to pass. I mean, we could do a mass call campaign, but unfortunately, this is kind of flying under the radar. There's so many things going on in politics right now. Very few people are actually paying attention to internet privacy rules. What can we do? I mean, we've always suggested to people that they encrypt. Is that it? Do you just run a VPN all the time? Would that fix whatever this rule change breaks?
No, it actually won't. It will prevent the ISPs from being able to sell what sites you visit, but it still gives them the ability to sell your geolocation. Remember how angry we all got when the FBI and the various other law enforcement people started using stingers? Well, this is the exact same information, because the ISP knows where you're coming from. In fact, in some cases, it's even more accurate than a stinger, because a stinger, you'd have to have multiple radios to triangulate where the heck you're coming from. Whereas with this, I know what location the IP is coming from. So, call, write, telegram, whatevers. Get angry, because this is a problem. This means that law enforcement actually don't even need stingers anymore, because they've got more information than before.
Yeah, that's actually that very good point there, which is we got worked up with the stingers. We're talking about the man-in-the-middle devices that would capture cell phone information and allow them to actually look at the data being transmitted. This is worse than that, because, I mean, if you think about it, who is going to be the biggest third party? The biggest third party is going to be the government, because they would love to get their hands on what we give to ISPs and to social media companies. And that actually is, yeah, that is a little scary. Lou, let me ask you to come in here on this. When we've had issues like this in the past, I'm thinking of SOPA, there was normally a big push in the tech sector. You know, people who actually, their lives depend on this, their livelihoods depend on this. This is what they deal with day in and day out. And they were able to make a big enough noise that people who otherwise wouldn't care about this said, okay, maybe that's something I should support. Nothing. We've had this in the news for over a month now. We've known that this has been coming. I've heard no tech giant come out and say, no, this is a bad idea. Is there going to be a noise, or is this one of those things that's just going to slide in under the radar?
You know, I can't speak. Unfortunately, I can't speak for any company, but I think that for me, I think personally, I think there's a ton of things going on, like you said, in politics right now that people are making more noise about, like net neutrality and other things, right? And I think that These things are kind of blinding or turning the blind eye towards issues like this, unfortunately, even though they're not necessarily smaller issues. People are, the concept of bigger fish to fry. I think, that it's unfortunate because, we need some more advocates behind privacy scenarios like this that push people into really kind of thinking about the issues. Maybe they don't understand that your ISP's got control over all your traffic, and like Brian said, your location information. If you don't regulate that, it's a slippery slope. There's going to be something else that comes along that they're going to start doing too, right? Maybe especially if there's no regulation, maybe it's time that they could say they can start giving your demographic information too that goes along with it, and then it starts. Maybe they start giving information that's personal and then it's identifiable, and they can start sending you mailers and other things, and people knocking at your door and calling you on the phone. So I think it's a slippery slope, and it needs to be regulated. But unfortunately, like I said, there's so much noise on the wires right now about everything else. People are blinded and people are distracted, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and actually, we've got a great comment in the chat room right now from Community Nets, who is associated with our guest tonight, who says that the scary part of this vote, the truly scary part, is this is not the FCC pulling back on the rules. This is not like the decision they made earlier in the month when they said they weren't going to enforce the standard privacy issue. This is a Congressional Review Act, which is essentially Congress saying the FCC doesn't have this power. They didn't have the power to make this rule. What that means that if the FCC administration does change, they can't simply come back in and say, no, those rules were good, we're going to put them back into place. They'd have to have another Congressional Review Act in order to put these back into play. So, I mean, that's why there's this desperate stink that's coming off the people who are watching this. They're saying, look, this is not a simple rule change. This is something that's going to linger for a generation or more, which means it's time to act. It's time to tell people. It's time to let people get informed. It still has to go through the House. Right now, it looks like it's going to be an easy pass. But, I mean, if you put enough pressure and you let your representative know that you're watching and that you are interested and that you do not want your data to be sold as a product without being told and without being compensated, then we have no chance to complain later on.